Mesa Digital Twins, Python, and OSS with Dr. Jackie Kazil. Jackie, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing good. Just to let you know, I'm a little under the weather, so I might sound a little froggy at times.
Right? Everybody got rocked over the holidays.
Don't go outside. Just
exactly.
Don't.
Holy mackerel. I got COVID. One of our other co-hosts, Roger, he's down with like something terrible that I'm not going to describe live on the air. Children are walking petri dishes everywhere. It was, this holiday season was just, I feel bad for the doctors that had to spend so much time dealing with everybody.
Not my kind of doctor. Not like the kind of doctor I am, but the other
medical doctors.
So
we've gotten destroyed. Charlotte, how was your holidays? What did you guys do?
Took it easy. We were supposed to go to the in-laws, but they had COVID. So, and then New Year's, I was going to invite a bunch of my friends over. And the day before, one had like some kind of stomach bug. The next day, someone had a fever, and I was like, you know what? No.
Everybody just hunkered down. It was worse than the quarantine times. What about you, Sean? What did you do?
Yeah, just hung around.
Sean, you're still muted.
Sorry, I'm figuring out this new format. I was having echo and like delayed text and delayed chat and everything. Just hung around. Visited with some family, some friends who moved cross country, and they were back in the neighborhood. So our kids got together. That was fun.
Nobody in the household got sick?
Not our household. We got sick all pre-Christmas. We were all sick from like basically the beginning of October until the end of November. It's just like nonstop. Child one gets it, child two gets it, we get it. And
you're the only family that I've heard of so far that did not get like something either for Christmas or for New Year's. You're lucky. And I'm super happy to continue on with our Python series. And I had a conversation with Dr. Kazil around the middle of last year, and we were chatting about the Mesa project and OSS contributions and everything, and we were lucky enough to get her to deign to visit us with her brand new PhD and talk about the Mesa project and open source and all of the things. So Jackie, how have you been? It's been a minute since we spoke.
It has been a minute. Good. It's been certainly a journey. I think this project, it was started in 2014. I started my PhD work in 2010. It took a few years there were some hiccups. I took one class a semester. It wasn't about necessarily the gold star at the end as much as the journey.
Nice.
So, yeah. So let me, how much do you know about agent-based modeling?
Let's pretend that I'm a dummy.
Okay.
Sean probably has a lot more information about it than I do, but we have the audience is a wide range of folks. So we'll take it from the beginning and start from there. Do you want me to cut you over to the stage?
Yeah, cut me over to the slide I hit up. There we go. So this is kind of, an overview. Agent-based models are a way to simulate autonomous entities over time. So what does that mean? It's sort of think about individual entities in a system, and they have actions or reactions to the environment around them. So with that, it's not just inputs and outputs. It is also the temporal space and spatial paths, the pathway by which they get through the system that's being studied. So it's not, it's the end states, but also the dynamics of the system. I like to give the example of, so people can understand this in a way that they can relate to. Think about your retirement funds sitting in the stock market, and if you were to model the performance of your funds, if you've gotten 20%, let's say over 3 years, that's great. Before you had 0% increase, and now you have 20. But when we talk about the importance of the pathway in between, those 2 points. We're looking at, would you like 20% that kind of goes wildly up and down, where you might make irrational decisions as a human in reaction to that? Or would you like 20% where you were provided a pathway that was kind of the slow notching upwards, where you were always in this kind of like safe zone of increase? And so that's the importance of sort of the not just the inputs and the outputs of this type of modeling, but the pathway by which it gets there as well. So let me show, I think I might have some examples that might be helpful. Visuals, is that helpful? Okay. Let me switch over to another tab. Are you familiar with this?
Yes, but
I am not.
Okay.
Talk to me.
Well, okay. So just to let you know, in my other deck that I showed, that was for my dissertation, and the slide after that one was actually a slide that explains open source with stuff like pull requests and other things. So I'm assuming you didn't need that slide, and that you have that information. So basically, so like let's talk about like the modeling of this behavior. This is sort of like considered the most simple agent-based model. Each cell, imagine a grid on this, which you can't see, but each cell has makes a decision every time tick, which basically says, I will continue to exist, or I will not continue to exist, or I will do something else. And then it ends up in what's considered these emergent patterns. So this pattern going to the bottom right corner is sort of this transient pattern of cells that never hits a steady state, while that little square on the top right is a collection of cells or agents in this particular example that hit a steady state. And so this is the sort of example that is the example that some people have grown up with or seen before with respect to, I'm sorry, I have another little coming in. Good night. For another good night.
Oh.
Good night, buddy. Their bedtime is about 10 minutes ago, so
perfect timing.
Hopefully there's no more interruptions. But this is sort of the most simple version of this idea of like what an agent-based model is. And then they sort of increase in fidelity. There's this, the second level of this, one of the most well-known one is called Schelling's segregation model, which basically said that it's not that, and this is a theory, this is a theory that was tested, it's not actually true or not true. This basically said it's not that segregated neighborhoods do not necessarily occur because people dislike each other, but it is because people like to be near people like themselves. And when there's a certain threshold of wanting to have similarity of those around you, then if that threshold, that personal threshold isn't met, then the particular agent in the system becomes unhappy, and that ends up towards these large areas of segregation. Like I said, I'm just sharing sort of theories that exist out there, not saying that they're correct. It's just when this behavior is modeled, that's how it ends up. And one of the interesting ones is NCASE's parable of the polygons, which is actually one you can play with. Let me see if I can pull it up and drop a link. Yes, it's still up, because this is kind of an older presentation. Okay, I just posted it in the comments. Oh, it failed to post for some reason. Huh. It doesn't like me. Can you share that?
I'm sorry, what's happening? What?
Wait. How can I message you quickly? I'm trying to share a link and it's not working for people for some reason I'm having a issue with the comments.
Maybe so unshare that. So I think you can only share one thing at a time. Are you trying to share two things?
Oh, no. I was trying to share a link in the comments.
Oh, in the comments. Oh.
Yeah.
It could be one of those safety feature things.
Yeah, I don't think it actually allows you to share links.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well then I will do a quick.
Or just like take the HTTP out of it and then remove a dot. try to fake it.
Is that the trick here?
We don't know. This is literally our first time trying this out. We're figuring this out as we go.
We're doing it live.
No. Okay. I'm gonna just share. Okay. So this was created by V. Hart and Nikki Case, and this is basically like an illustration of the sort of theory that Schelling proposed, and you can play with these models. You can play with these models on your own. I gotta wait to do this. I'm determined.
You're gonna figure this out.
I'm gonna figure this out. No, it's really not. Is it letting me post anything? Okay.
Is it in case? Here it is. Let me see if I can do it. Maybe I've got superpowers.
There we go.
Is that it? Okay, awesome.
That's it. That's it. Awesome. So people can, click around and sort of play with some of these live models, but you can basically, as you go down through this, you can set different thresholds that shows you how individual agents in the system act or react. Now, all these models don't necessarily need to have a spatial component. You can have, for example, a financial market, which doesn't have a spatial component. But in this particular case, because the spatial part is important, it kind of looks at sort of the entities around them. So you talk about, I'm going to go back to, let me share my tab again. We're going to go to some, have you ever heard of logo? Like
logo?
I have not.
Logo as in the programming language.
Oh, I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it.
Okay. Can you share the...
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is a program called NetLogo, which actually is where, I think the last time I checked, I'm in a ballpark, 80% of this type of modeling was done out of. And it's written by basically domain area experts, people who are usually not programmers, but because the language logo is very accessible, they provide these tools out of the box. A lot of folks use this, but if you look at the last model versus this model, sort of the models can grow in fidelity with respect to how much they mimic the real world. So this is one that is simulates a food chain of, sheep eat grass, wolves eat sheep, wolves die, they fertilize the earth, grass grows, et cetera, et cetera. If you mess with the level of energy, reproduction rates, number of initial numbers, you might have a system that completely collapses. So this is actually used in a lot of climate modeling, for example, with all the issues that are happening in climate change. It's used in political dynamics, migration. This is an example of migration models, which involves networks, and then and this is just agent-based models as a whole. This is not Mesa, but this is Los Alamos has created actually a one-to-one epidemiology model, and this is from 2015, pre-COVID, of the Los Angeles area, on how people move from work to home, et cetera, and how disease spread would happen in the city, and modeling the progression of that.
This is Sean's backyard right here. Sean's got a master's in epidemiology.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, a master's in science and epidemiology.
Fantastic.
It's weird that I work in IT, just sort of the way that the world went at the time.
We bring all kinds of minds to the table here at vBrownBag.
So is this based a little bit like, so I know there's the concept of reinforcement learning where you have sort of this thing has reinforcements, right? It gets positive tokens or signals if it does something right, and negative signals if it does something wrong. And it's trying to because I've seen, when you mentioned agent-based modeling, that's the first thing that came to my head, like an agent trying to move through a system. Maybe that's a robot trying to move through a warehouse, and maybe it hits a wall and that's wrong, so it starts over and it tries again. Is that sort of similar to agent-based, like this approach of agent-based modeling?
Yeah, so it is the integration of reinforcement learning is probably the most used integration of another machine learning technique with this type of modeling technique. So reinforcement learning is about the idea of what you said, sort of like, I want to get this task done. How do I train someone or make it more efficient to get it done? But some of the modeling is just the system dynamics. And because of the sort of random nature of each run, unless there's a seed sort of dictating where, how it's going to turn out, you can have 10,000 runs that all turn out different, but then it provides you with some sort of probabilities of with these starting parameters, there's a 10% chance this will happen. There's a 20% chance this will happen. There's a 1% chance it'll be complete failure and it'll cost us $50 million, or something else that I don't want to be dark and macabre about, but and policy makers can then make decisions off of that kind of information.
I see. So sort of would it be fair to say that it's a sort of a type of unsupervised learning approach where you're trying to you have this data, you have these patterns with your agents, and you're trying to predict probabilities rather than sort of yes or no or a trend. It's more like, I have this data, I have these environments, and I'm trying to predict this outcome or that outcome based on just this random data that I have, unless you seed it to get the same result at the same time. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah. I think I know what you're getting at, and I would say yes and no. You're not really. It's unsupervised, but it's not really training. In that, in machine learning, you end up with a model. After you have your model trained, you can then do inference modeling.
Right.
With this type of model, you just have the model of the system. So what you could do then is train a model on top of the model of the system. But but it's kind of, I would say, more like two separate things unless you explicitly brought them together. And most people don't bring them together, if that makes sense. It's been used in like, so I dug through, there's been research published off of it. And the research and the way people are using Mesa specifically includes autonomous vehicle routing, a lot of in the medical or medical adjacent realm, health related, let's say. Most of it has been around disease spread, around mainly COVID, but that's because of the timing, right? And the growth happened during that timing. So of course there's a lot of research around that. Some of it's also though around, I think there was one paper that was around, I remember it having to do with breast cancer research of the blockchain. And I think I read it a couple times, and there are some of these papers that I get lost in. I couldn't, I just had to step away. I'm like, I don't even know why you're doing this. Even though I read the reasoning over and over again, I couldn't accept it.
Because it's the blockchain, man. Blockchain is bad. Ooh.
Yeah, it was the blockchain part that drew me in, but also the blockchain part that like kicked me out. I was like, what did I just read?
Yeah, I can imagine.
There's a lot of, there's quite a bit of research on energy, something called positive energy districts, energy markets, energy adoption, basically for more efficiency. In the tech realm, there's a significant amount of security stuff, some having to do with like hard disk recycling, critical tipping points with malware propagation, decentralization of public key infrastructure for autonomous embedded systems, simulated computing, resource management policies, which is actually another library that's built on top of Mesa. And then, actually modeling the product delivery process. I think it was like project management. And then, everything to like biology, ecology, evolutionary stuff, monitoring wildlife and mapping wildlife to optimize like where drone placement should happen because there aren't enough humans to be able to see and make sure that wildlife populations are healthy. So it's been used in a variety of, I'm surprised every day with the papers that I've seen coming out of it. Mesa's not the only tool out there. There are other tools in other languages, but it's the one in the Python world, I would say. But I might be biased. So I mentioned, I think I said EdgyBees, but it's EdgeSymPy. I can't share a link. I will write the word. Oh, this is good. I got this.
Yeah.
.github.io.
EdgeSymPy.github.io.
So I have not used this, but this came up in some of the research. I don't know anything about the people who created it, but it looks interesting to me in that it basically is a simulation toolkit for edge computing.
There we go. And for the people watching this in the future, we'll post all these links in the show notes and everything. So that'll all be in there.
Yeah, it looks, to me, it looks like an interesting toolkit that I wish I had an excuse to use, but I don't. And it looks pretty well put together for, there's this moment when you have an open source project where you're like, oh, people are really using this and they're depending on me to not mess it up. This is a real thing.
Can I ask about that aspect of it, about open source contributions? And because we've all seen the XKCD cartoon where there's all this huge infrastructure, this giant enterprise like monolith, and one little tiny piece is being maintained by some dude in Nebraska for the past 12 years thanklessly. Is that what Mesa is? I mean, so you put Mesa out into the wild. I'm assuming that other people are helping you to maintain it. Are they? Or is this is it all on your shoulders like Atlas?
Yeah, no. For a while it was, and there was good times and bad times. I started the project with somebody named Daveen Masad, who also went to the same university as I did. And it started out of we didn't like the tooling that existed out there. That tool that I showed you that used Logo to write the models. The first time I used it, I reached its limits. Mm-hmm. I think I was trying to model information propagation through Twitter and quickly understood that that couldn't handle Twitter. Not that I was trying to build Twitter, but it certainly pushed the limits and I got frustrated. And the other main tool out there is a tool called Mason, Mason. And Mason came out of George Mason, the same university I went to, and was built by somebody named Dr. Sean Luke. And he made a great tool in Java. I personally don't care for Java. I am not, I'm not like it has to be Python all the things. I appreciate Go. I'm starting to explore Rust a little bit, but I just was never a fan of Rust. Never a fan of Java. So
you and Sean have even more in common now. Sean? Are you a Go person now or a Rust person now? You've been going back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely Python is the first language, but I've been just playing around, messing and exploring both of those other languages just to see, try new things and see.
Would you say you're more a crustacean or a gopher now? Or a Pythonista?
Definitely still a Pythonista.
Okay, just check it. Just ask.
The most familiar language. So.
Well, no worries. From a math science perspective, the GoNum just I don't know when. I want to say it was just released. It's not just released, but it to be seemed like a very good. It seems like it's going in a good direction to be a solid numerical library that has that kind of plays the role that NumPy plays in the Python world. Certainly it's not there yet because it hasn't had like the people participate in it. But I'm interested to see where that goes.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. I think there was another package too that could do data frames and things like that, sort of like pandas, similar functionality as pandas, but I don't remember. I don't know if that was included in GoNum or if that was a separate package, but I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, not important. We'll find it wrote up on the show notes. So if did I hear you right though? That Edge SimPy is that? So they're using Mesa, right? Or
yes.
Did I hear that right? Yeah.
Yes.
That's like an example of it. Okay. That's to Chris's point. I mean, that's something, it's interesting to talk to grown, projects that start as an open source and then open it up, and then other people start relying on it, and sort of like, now we have to maintain this. Now we have to figure out how do contributions work? How do we allow the community to do it? How do we get testing in place so we don't break anything if somebody, now that I'm opening this up. So curious your thoughts on sort of how you've seen that progress. And I know we've kind of addressed that, but I'm curious, like, how do you take contributions well, I don't know. What's a good way to frame this question? Like,
how does it all work?
Exactly. Like, how does it all work?
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. And I think sort of discussing some of the growth of the complexity of the project is a good place to start. So when we started the project, the first thing we did, David and I, was go out into the world and look for other projects that already did this, because we said, why would we reinvent something that already exists? And certainly we can't be the first people with this idea. And we weren't necessarily the first people. But the things that we found that existed publicly were often created by one person who had and this is an interesting point. While this was in the academic area, I think this could happen outside of academia as well. It was very much one person, their project, and they wanted to have tight control over that project. Or they had their name or copyright all over it. And even when we approached them, they very much wanted to be a gatekeeper with respect to the work that was happening. And I think as a result, we tried to work with some other folks, and it wasn't quite moving at the pace that we wanted to. So we ended up starting our own project, basically boiling down the models that we had written in Python, and sort of, we had both written a couple and sort of taken these ideas and abstracted them outwards. So when we had our first version, it was David and I for a long time, which is great because it was like, hey, maybe we should, jump on the phone and talk about like features we want to add, or hey, I'm going to do this thing. And he'd be like, fine. And we were basically just committing everything to the main branch, and
straight to main. Like, there's no need for branches. Like, it's just the two of us. So.
Exactly.
Right.
And no one's dependent on this. And then eventually, when we decided to actually publish it to PyPI, then it was like, okay, well, maybe we should branch a little bit more, right? And then other folks joined, and we extended. There was an external package for geospatial created, which was exciting, called Mesa Geo, which actually there's another project called Mesa out there, and there's another library called GeoMesa, which makes us all very confusing. I think they've asked us to change our name, but we're not going to. I mean, I don't know that it was a serious request. I think everyone just possibly may get a little confused every now and then, but it's fine. But Mesa Geo is a geo extension, which was created by a GitHub user named Corvince. Now it's under, and this is part of our sort of maturing. We created the Project Mesa umbrella to have more community ownership rather than we own it, because we realized it wasn't going to be us forever. Or maybe it is, I don't know. But then as a result, because we had that Project Mesa umbrella on GitHub, we were able then to make a decision for the people maintaining it, because Corvince needed to step away, and he was the main maintainer, and other people of Mesa Geo, and other people wanted to push Mesa Geo forward to provide an umbrella under which we could sort of operate together, do releases together, and sort of provide a shelter for it while Corvince was unable to participate less. Now Corvince is back and is kind of a co-lead in the Mesa Geo realm, but it's kind of like adding, I would say, is like there is a constant, I don't want to say fight, but tension between adding the complexity of governance and bureaucracy versus just doing stuff. And now we're getting to a point where there's a new repo now. We're calling them MEPs. I'm writing the first couple, which is Mesa Enhancement Proposals, just like Python, right? We're trying to mitigate the issue of people want to make or propose major changes. We don't want them to like write a bunch of code. We don't want major changes. Now we have a couple of people who are core maintainers who've joined over the years, and we don't want necessarily for major changes to happen in a pull request where somebody writes a bunch of code, somebody does a review and is like, this is great, and merges it in, or the person doing the review ends up not liking it and they end up pushing back on it and doesn't allow for the conversation to happen. And so that's now why we're bringing in this idea of like MEPs. And then part of that is, when do you have to write a MEP versus just submit a PR? And add a little bit more sort of governance and control around what happens.
So
that's an interesting approach. Yeah.
I was going to ask, because that gets into a question that I have. Like, if you go back into the early days and then go into today, so it sounds like in the early days there were two people, right? And so when it was just the two of you, did you ever like kind of have to figure out ways where, let's say maybe one person wants this feature and another person's kind of like, I don't want that feature, and like, was there like a way you would do like a tiebreaker type situation? And then fast forward to today, was it easier working with, say, two people versus, today?
Well, with two people, I would say David and I both had our strengths and weaknesses. I think sometimes I have imposter syndrome, and I like to think that if you think about it, everyone's an imposter at some point, or doesn't know what they're doing, right? So people have things they're really good at, and people have things they're not. And I believe David and I were able to mesh well in the initial creation of the project because we sort of leaned on each other in other ways. And I don't think we were ever, if somebody was really passionate about it, I think about something, I think the other person respected and honored that passion because we understood where each of us was coming from. We understood our strengths and weaknesses and had worked together before. Also, like, we know each other so well that like I have a cell phone number. So, if I have a problem, I can text him. Or call him, or have a short line. Is where when you have folks that are more distributed. Now we have folks we have regular development meetings that are, I believe, the second Saturday of every month, and they are scheduled at currently usually at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Right now we have no contributors or no one interested in being a contributor past East Coast, heading westward in the US. Which is why it's 7 a.m. because we also on the other side have a contributor in Singapore. And you have to sort of figure out the combination of scheduling around the world, and it's gonna, no matter what, it's gonna hurt for someone somewhere. We've adjusted a couple times when people have dropped or come on board, but it's been those major sort of monthly syncs where we kind of have, I don't want to call it battle royale, but where we take some of those things that were conversations online and we say, okay, we need to resolve this, right? we're just going to keep talking about this and we're never going to come to a conclusion. So, people will advocate during the meeting, I want to talk about X, Y, Z. And we also talk about, the customary release stuff and stuff like that.
Nice. So, I like that because, sorry, I was going to say I like that.
No, please.
Like a lot of times I feel people I know, sometimes myself included, will be like, hey, let's get on GitHub or something, and we're gonna share this thing out to the world, and this is some good insight, because I think a lot of times it is where it's something a single person is holding close to the vest because it's just I want my name all over it and to be known for it, whatever. But say with me doing vBrownBag, working with Chris, Sean, Roger, stuff like that, it's really nice to work with a group of people so you get those different perspectives and stuff like that. So it's just really nice to get some of that perspective of, okay, if you decide you want to share something to the community, and let's say you start letting people contribute, how you start mitigating that, because I don't think that gets talked about a lot.
Right.
Agree. And I will say off of that, it actually became a point of tension in my PhD. So I never intended to do my PhD on Mesa. I was actually studying the dynamics of open source contributions in the Python ecosystem on GitHub.
Oh, really?
And then,
wow.
Yeah. Huh. And then one day, my advisor, the head of the department, had said to me, "Why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing your dissertation on Mesa?" And I was like, "You serious? This is a thing? What? Why can't I? Why have I been doing this? There's so much more work. That writes itself for me." And so I go to do that, and then I had these problems in the paper writing itself and in my defense, where I kept on saying we.
Mm-hmm.
And my advisor was like, I.
Yeah.
I. And I'm like, but it wasn't I, it was we. And he's like, what's your contribution? And I had to sit down and really sit there and say I know I did something. I mean, this project exists because of me,
right.
But what did I do? How do
That's a good point.
How do I remove the we from open source and turn it into I? The whole time I was trying to fight against that. And then in the end, this exercise and this academic exercise of writing a dissertation and doing a fence was forcing me back into that. What did I do? And it was a struggle. It was a struggle. Luckily, it was academically acceptable for two people to work on something together, so that are both students in the state of Virginia. There's academic precedence for this. So the fact that David and I created this thing, we did that, was an acceptable usage of we. But then I had to go back through my whole dissertation and evaluate pronouns and the usage of pronouns, and then literally make bullets where it was I managed the project. I created governance. And it was a very weird exercise. It was especially since I have imposter syndrome, it was somebody basically telling me to not telling me, but to basically telling me to own my work where I hadn't before, and it felt very foreign.
And see, I feel you. I feel like this is when we get into our therapy session of vBrownBag.
Oh, hold on. Let me get my pad out.
Yeah, we're sure, right? Mr. Cloud Therapist. So, I am someone where, especially growing up, societal, whatever, for a good chunk of time, it's always there's no I in team, right? But there comes a time where you do have to be dang it, I did all this stuff. There was no we. There's the we part and then there's the I part. And this is something my therapist, Chris, talks to me about all the time because I'm super modest. And there's a lot of and there's a lot of stuff that I do, and I don't own it. I let other people talk about it for me, and so I'm trying to get better at that myself. Because when I'm saying I all the time, it makes my skin crawl or something.
Me too. And I had this actually. I wrote. I can't write. How did I get a PhD?
Hey, congrats on that.
Words hard.
Congrats on that PhD.
Thanks. I don't know how it happened.
Especially being functionally illiterate. I mean, that's amazing. Kudos to you. I'm totally joking. Clearly,
can I just say that my parents are both were born in Czechoslovakia, and my first language was Czech. And when I hit American school systems, the American schools back in the 80s said to my parents, "You made a mistake with your first kid. Don't make a mistake with your second." And they, from that point on, only spoke English. So from age 0 to 6 or 7, primary language, everything Czech. From 6 or 7 onward, broken English. Even my dissertation had language sentence structures in it that were structured a little bit more like the Czech language, but in English. And what I realized was I am no master of any language. I'm just kind of in limbo between languages, which I think, I kind of think about it in the same way that I think about programming languages. And I keep on thinking, if I can learn multiple programming languages, and I taught Python to myself, if I can learn Python and I can learn Go, then I can go ahead and teach myself English. When I say English, I mean proper English.
Me learning Korean.
Yes.
The way that you just described your upbringing is exactly to the age, exactly what happened to me with the Greek language. So I was that exact same pattern, but with Greek. Moved to the States, spoke Greek for the first couple of years, and then flipped over, and in the American schooling system, had to then immediately start learning English. So I feel you.
Yeah. And English as a second language back then was not supported. Now it is.
Absolutely.
Well, theoretically, depending on where you are. I'm saying that as a blanket statement.
Yeah.
Right, totally.
I grew up speaking Spanish, but a lot of people weren't speaking it around me because I have family that's from Panama, my stepmom, so I was speaking Spanish, but people weren't really speaking it around me, and now I just know words.
Exactly.
Words are hard.
Words are hard. This is where I say that
English is just I don't know Greek language or Czech, but I feel like traditional or a lot of languages that stem in Europe are Latin based. So it's structure is the same, conjugation is the same, it kind of flows in a similar pattern. But then you get to English and it's wait a minute, there's 3 different ways to say this and 5 different words and spelled differently depending on the context. So it's not the easiest language. I'm trying to learn anyway, I could go into languages. I find them super fascinating, not just computer languages. I'm trying to learn Japanese, and it's racking my brain because it's just so different than English.
I am too right now. Actually, we should talk about this later. I'm also currently learning Japanese.
Yeah, you guys should be study buddies.
Stephanie just brought up a really good point, and this is actually I almost am reluctant to say this out loud because this is an entirely different can of worms. But the whole we versus I thing, definitely, I've seen a schism in women have a harder time. Well, no. If I say that, that's going to turn into a soundbite for my future political thing.
I'll
I feel okay. Yeah, go ahead. You say it.
I'll save you. So for me, this is something I've talked about with Cisco because I'm a Cisco champion, and I did the after hours radio thing where I can't speak for all women, but I can speak for me, and I can speak for a majority of my tech friends where unfortunately, what happens is if we're being assertive or talking up or delegating out tasks, the same way a guy does, we're seen as being bossy. And that's saying it politely, right? So we end up having to, at times, just move a little bit differently, which is annoying. But yeah, even with things like with salary, like a lot of guys, like I'll know where they'll go out and like demand, I want this amount of money. And then a lot of times with a lot of women, myself included in the past, I'm just like, oh, okay, that's what you're gonna give me. Thank you. Like,
yeah, the I-we thing. I was actually wanted to bring that up, but we're gonna jump here a little bit. Okay, that is a secret link. Between the first word and the second word, put a .com/.
Between the first word and the second word, put a .com/.
Yeah, and you will get a history of languages in that little tiny graphic. You can see a full history of like languages and their derivatives and what came before what and what led to what. I think it's a very interesting graphic.
Cool.
Yeah.
Since we were talking about the how languages relate to each other, I was going to bring it back to programming languages. But going back to I and we. Yes, and when I was working on my dissertation, first of all, I did put a little slight in the text, basically stating that the act of a dissertation is a act of I, when open source is we. So I explicitly mentioned that, and it was very difficult because I literally put a picture of myself in my dissertation. Running an open source, like at an open source sprint in PyCon with like 15 people in 23. Because I was talking about sprints and how much sprints have accelerated the project. And I also showed like the history of GitHub contributions and how they related to sprints and how there are these spikes every time there's a PyCon sprint. And there have been like 7 of these spikes in the history of the project, minus 2020 and 21. And it was, like I said, it was very hard. But then I realized exactly what you said, Shala, about the act of saying I or we when it comes to the workplace. Mm-hmm. And I think it's been something of a problem of mine as well when it came to what do you call the yearly reviews? When you have yearly reviews and you say, well, I did this and this and this, also during job interviews. And it's funny because I look when I've done a lot of interviews. I worked with my previous employer. I was employee number 20 and we grew to 280. I think at one time I was in 3 years. I think at one time I was running like 18 loops. Like it became my life for a short period. Mm-hmm. And I got very quick on pulling out the work that people did when they would talk about their previous jobs by almost like pushing them to say I. Because we, even though when I say we, my intent is to be inclusive, when you say we during a job interview or during an evaluation, it does not do you a service. Like the dissertation, saying we in the dissertation was a battle in that I'm like, I cannot not say we, but they were like, no, you need to say I. Yeah. More eyes. I want slides with eyes all over them. I'm like, you literally want me to say I. They're like, yes. I'm like, you want the pronoun I am It felt like to me I was saying, I am awesome. Give me my dissertation.
I know. I just went through my speaking of reviews. So I just went through my yearly review at the end of last year, right? And shout out to my project manager, who's awesome and an ally and super supportive, where straight up pulled me to the side and just like, look, this is what I need you to do, like in your review. Where it's just like, yeah, I and put numbers, like, you know. And it felt good because I had never really actually done that with a review before. And I saved that review. And I'm just like, you know what? I am freaking amazing. Yep. So I'm encouraging that.
No, I think I'm on my 1 year in 6 days. And so I'm literally going through the exercise and I'm writing, and then I'm going back and saying, we did X, but I did Y.
Yep.
Because I cannot not say the we.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to wipe away the we's, unless it's, you know, important for that particular part. But it is a hard exercise that I really struggled with. Probably like one of the hardest things in my dissertation is the usage of pronouns. I mean, also because I can't speak English, so that's also.
You seem to be doing all right.
Yes.
So I always like to make things accessible to people. It's like I taught Python myself. I mean, I taught myself Python, and I've created a boot camp inside Capital One, which trained folks up, like hundreds of developers, to become engineers at Capital One, who are not engineers. And so I'm really all about making everything as accessible as possible that should be. There are certain things that can't be. I will throw out the example, being a medical doctor.
Yeah.
Like, I do not want people to teach themselves how to be a medical doctor. But like, you know, the idea of a PhD or dissertation or something like that, I mean, I'm going to be honest, going back to the language thing, my GRE scores were not the strongest in English when it came to admittance. You know, it's more a test of, I think, stamina, and in some cases, spite. Like, a lot of people finish out of spite.
Right.
By the time they get to that point, than anything else.
Just hate finish it.
Yeah, just a little bit every day. That's actually, so we talked earlier about epidemiology. I got my master's in epidemiology, but when I got out, it was the recession, like the 2000, whenever, don't remember.
2008.
Yeah, thank you. And so I couldn't get a job, and then I got like oh, you did this in your master's with this computer program, we could use your help. And I was like, okay, but it wasn't like in my field. And then I was talking to somebody at the job, and I was like, wow, networking is really interesting. And he's like, yeah, you should totally get your CCNA before you get, you know, life gets crazy and all these things. I literally went to the public library and rented a book on Cisco networking and took the exam, and like that's how I got into networking, and that's why I'm in IT, was just because like that accessibility factor, and like, you know, if you're interested in something, like, you know, to your point, of course I felt like an imposter when I first started, but I'm like, well, this is super interesting and I'm going to keep learning about it, right? So like, I think that's really important, like having that, not letting that imposter syndrome overtake you, and just a little bit every day. Like, I'm just gonna hammer away at this until it's in my brain, right? And I feel comfortable with it. So.
And I say sorry.
Oh no, so go ahead. You're the guest.
I'll say when I've interviewed people before, I am more likely to hire someone who talks about the way they teach themselves and how they approach a problem that they don't know, and the answers that they provide for that more than their actual level of knowledge. I would rather have somebody who can do that, who needs a bit of like training up and experience, than somebody who has all the experience, but can't necessarily break down or think about how to like learn or solve a problem.
Right.
Yeah. Hire a smart person that can figure it out rather than somebody that's got experience. But yeah.
It's impossible to know everything, but can you figure it out? That's the question. You know how to get the right answer. So
exactly.
All right. We are at time, so we need to put a pin in this. Jackie, thank you so much for coming on. This was wonderful. Super enjoyed having you on. Thank you for sharing your insights on open source and Mesa and everything else that we've talked about. Misogyny in the workplace. This was a wide-ranging vBrownBag that included therapy and thank you from the audience as well.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
So we'll get all of the links. We're gonna have to figure out how to fix links so that guests can actually just post links in there, because that's gonna be weird going forward. And thank you for coming on the inaugural new kinks and bumps and bruises included episode of vBrownBag with us. So folks, thanks very much, and we will see you next week. All right, and I'll see if I can turn this off properly.